My job as a choreographer is to make people move. So to start off, I'd like you to put yourselves in my shoes. While you are seated, I'd like you to think of one dance movement. It could be anything you'd like. And if I point to you, I'd like you to stand up, turn around, and demonstrate for those around you. Don't be self-conscious. This is just being recorded for anyone on the internet to see. I'll give you a couple seconds to think about it, and then we'll go, okay? Ready? No, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to make you do that. No. See, then I'd be hiring dancers for no pay, and there is enough of that in my profession already. There is a reason I did that to you, though. That surge of energy coursing through your veins in this moment, some may call it panic, can tell you a surprising amount. Think about your initial reaction to my request. Were you worried about having to come up with something on the spot? Were you concerned that those around you might judge you or think your idea silly? Were you fearful of feeling vulnerable? Or perhaps you were secretly hoping I'd pick you because you have a default go-to dance move that you save for special occasions. You know the one. No matter your reaction, how you interact with those around you determines what those relationships can yield. Keep that gut reaction you had in mind as I tell you about my own discoveries through dance. Now, in July of last year, my ballet company performed at a large, well-known venue in New York City after a year of preparation. I choreographed and produced a full evening of my work, and I worked with a team of nearly 100 people, dancers, musicians, a chamber choir, and a full administrative and production crew. The entire experience was blissfully, euphorically, entirely exhaustive, but not exhausting in the way one might expect. In the final months leading up to my performances, my rehearsal schedule went from 0 to way past the speed limit. And yet, I felt more focused and energized than in all the months prior. And it wasn't just because I experienced an increase in efficiency. Something had shifted, not only in my focus, control, and critical thinking, but also in the way I related and responded to others. I came to realize that my work choreographing in the studio was directly influencing everything outside of it. And so thinking on my feet, so to speak, isn't just about the positive effects of physical activity on creativity and productivity. Actively engaging with my artistic practice has had a profound and lasting impact on my professional and personal development. And one realization has stayed with me throughout, that anyone can apply certain choreographic principles to better themselves and their relationships with others. So, what exactly is choreography? At its most basic, it is the design of movements, patterns, and phrases to create sequences articulated with physical bodies and most often set to music. As with many other artistic disciplines, choreographers use the tools at hand: music, dancers, and the basic building blocks of technique and style, and they transform them with their ideas. The aim is to make the whole greater than the sum of its parts. Why is it important that these elements are transformed? Think about it this way. If you read a review of a fabulous novel, you don't ever hear them say, "You used a lot of really big fancy words throughout." Sometimes the words repeated a lot, other times not so much. Sometimes they appeared only once. "It was fantastic, 10 out of 10, would recommend." It's how the words transcend the confines of the page that matters. There are only 26 letters in the English alphabet, and yet the combinations and the permutations are limitless when seized and nurtured and arranged and rearranged until the sentences turn symphonic. The same is true in dance. There is an oft-repeated quote by the genius choreographer and father of American ballet, George Balanchine, which goes, "There are no new steps, only new combinations." Now, this doesn't mean that I don't spend countless hours agonizing over the minutiae of these combinations and whether the left foot starts to the left and then goes to the right, or maybe it starts to the right and then goes to the left, or maybe it really does start to the left, but then it goes a little bit more to the left, and then goes to the right while the right arm goes to the right and the head goes to the left. This is a lot of my day, every day. So, as you may have gathered, I'm a bit of a perfectionist. For every hour I spend in the studio with my dancers, I can spend upwards of 5 to 6 hours choreographing on my own. I listen to the music until the play count is in the hundreds. I take meticulous notes on paper and on my computer, and I map out the overall structure of the ballet I want to create and what I plan to achieve in rehearsal each day. I can be obsessive about musicality, detail-oriented about steps, and hyper-focused on shapes and geometries. But why am I doing all of this? What is the larger purpose? It's because I'm chasing that elusive something that comes out of the right steps, in the right combinations, at the right time, in the right environment, with the right people. This is what drives me to use the medium of dance to dive into the infinite potential of exploring human relationships. So choreography, the noun, the art itself, is the literal embodiment of the intangible. It's the expression of concepts and feelings made visible. But to choreograph, the verb, the practice of creating the art, that's where things get more interesting. My form of self-expression requires a series of reactions from within. The first is inevitably a visceral response to a piece of music that heightens my senses and drives me to create. But from there, I'm a walking contradiction. Everything I do from that point forward is a calculated compulsion, a sought-out knee-jerk reaction to my surroundings and thoughts and feelings, a carefully designed plan to proceed with abandon. This contradiction holds true for many artists, composers, painters, poets. Some of the most virtuosic and pioneering artists in their field start out with rigorous structured training from an early age. It is only after they have honed their craft to the point of being borderline monastic that they can break free from these confines and forge new paths. The distinction is, with choreography, the heart of the creative process ultimately takes place in real time. When composers create new scores, they are often isolated, conjuring music in their heads until it is printed and passed to the players to interpret. Now, as I said, I do quite a bit of preparation in isolation. But once I'm in the studio, all of that listening, prepping, planning, and seemingly solidified football playing, marching band formation, stick figure scribbling is in peril. Because suddenly, my internal monologue becomes an open conversation, and the characters are actively challenging the plot. 3 things are then happening at once. My analytical side is adjusting the overall structure I had in place for the work. My emotional side is seeking the best way to use another person's physical form as a conduit for my own voice. And this is a big one, I'm shifting from the role of passive thinker to dynamic leader. Now let me be clear, I'm not trying to flatter myself. When one thinks of a dynamic leader, the image of a resolute, larger-than-life figure may come to mind. But ponder that word dynamic. It is inherently defined by the concept of movement. We want leaders who can mobilize others, who can elevate discourse, and who can shift perspectives. It also means that that person must be adaptive, proactive, and reactive. The decisions they make are informed, but they are made on the spot with the information at hand. In the studio, one of the most important markers of an effective choreographer is one who communicates dynamically. Think for a moment about everyone's favorite team building exercise, the trust fall. They're called trust falls for a reason. They build trust. But it's the word fall that grabs my attention. Not only are these exercises a physical embodiment of communication and relationship building, but they're an accelerant. Showing someone that you are trustworthy, trusting, or both builds a relationship infinitely faster than telling that person that you are. What happens if there's a communication breakdown between a manager and an employee in a meeting? Someone drops the ball. Not great. But what happens if there's a communication breakdown between my dancers and me in the studio? Someone could literally get dropped. So the stakes are high in either case, but I'd be willing to bet that the risk of imminent physical injury makes us that much more attentive. And so we have to be present in the moment. And by virtue of that, we are engaged with ourselves and with each other. So there's the physical aspect of dynamic response, but there's a scarier type of trust fall, one that carries even more risk, but possibly more reward, and that is the pursuit of vulnerability. It is one thing to brace statically for impact in moments when exposure feels inevitable and you are unable to maintain a perfectly polished facade. But to chase that deeply personal discomfort, actively and with purpose, can prove transformative. I lay myself out in front of dancers, collaborators, audiences, critics. Being creative requires that I ask all those who are present to engage with the most exposed, raw parts of myself. It's the emotional equivalent of intense weightlifting, creating minuscule tears in the muscle fiber in order to come back stronger. If it is the dancer's job to absorb, interpret, and expose the inner workings of my mind, then I must be willing to share that information with them readily and effectively. The dancers must trust in my ideas, and I must trust them to bring their perspectives to enhance and transform them. As a choreographer, it is also my responsibility to adapt my work to meld with what distinguishes each dancer as an individual while still maintaining the integrity of my vision. It's a symbiotic relationship in a sensitive ecosystem. This ecosystem extends further. The dancers must trust each other, and the audiences must trust us with the time and attention they have invested. So how do I get these players to be invested? More importantly, why does it matter if they are? Should anyone care that I feel strongly, really, really strongly, if the count is on 7.5 and not 7? Or that the head should tilt just a bit more to the left? Does any of this matter when the final curtain comes down and everyone goes back to their daily lives? Creating art is about connection. It's about communication. It's about shared experience. This is not new information. We know this. There have been countless studies done that prove the value of the arts in creating a more emotionally intelligent, cohesive, and progressive society, and about the importance of ensuring that diverse perspectives are given a voice to broaden the narrative. What interests me is how we get there and why. We engage in trust falls in everyday life, and yet we neglect to think of them as such. We are met with moments that challenge us, relationships that try us, decisions that paralyze us. How do we communicate to cultivate deeper connection and understanding? Think like a choreographer. Come prepared, but be prepared to adapt. Be reactive, but not reactionary. Be confident, but don't conflate confidence with being confident you're always right. Be present in the moment and trust the fall. Earlier this week, I put my own words to the test, working with two extraordinary dancers from American Ballet Theatre, Stephanie Williams and Calvin Royal III, who are present with us in the audience today. I choreographed, rehearsed, and filmed a new ballet for you all to see today in just a matter of hours. I brought my basic building blocks to the studio. See what happens when intuitive interaction colors the creative process. Bye.